our show.
Thank you very much, Brian. Thanks so much for the kind introduction. Yes, the oldest and only daughter of Brian and Mila. But thank you very much for the introduction, and thank you for the invitation to join you all today. Good morning, everyone. I'm very pleased to be here to speak about our government's plan to connect more people to more places, jobs, and services. There's no better way to do that than by making targeted and smart investments in transit and transportation. As we continue to respond to the COVID-19 pandemic and kickstart our economic recovery, investing in Ontario's infrastructure will be critical to our long-term success and our prosperity. This pandemic has underscored the urgency of creating the right conditions for growth. Our government has a plan to get Ontario's economy back on track. It's a Made in Ontario plan for growth, renewal, and long-term recovery. Nous avons un plan pour remettre l'économie de l'Ontario sur les rails. Il s'agit d'un plan de croissance, de renouvellement et de relance à long terme conçu en Ontario. Our 10-year infrastructure plan includes almost $143 billion of investments in projects that are crucial to ensuring that our province is ready for the future. That includes more than $62 billion for public transit, nearly half of our entire infrastructure plan, to bring improved service to communities, address congestion, and provide more sustainable, convenient, and affordable travel options for millions. It includes more than $20 billion for roads to expand and improve our highway network, to connect communities better, and to help people and goods travel more efficiently and safely across our province. Our plan will keep the supply chain strong while reducing congestion on roads here in the GTA and beyond. It will spur the kind of growth that creates jobs, fosters innovation, and attracts employers from all around the world. And we continue to make great progress on transit expansion right here in the GTA. Our 4 priority subway projects will get built at the best price for taxpayers by forging new partnerships. Our government is building a world-class integrated transportation network that will allow for seamless connections across municipalities, enable regional economic competitiveness and productivity, and will be ready to support the needs of a growing population. This is how Ontario will recover from the pandemic. We will make this province one of the best places in the world to live and work and raise a family. Nous ferons de cette province l'un des meilleurs endroits au monde pour travailler, pour vivre, et pour élever une famille. I look forward to today's discussion and working with you all to revitalize our economy.
Well, thank you very much for those opening comments. I really appreciate it. If I could just remind everyone, if you could please mute your line, I'd appreciate it so that we can stay focused on the minister. Minister, ridership is down dramatically in the TTC and Metrolinx and other transit associations around the province. What do you think your government needs to do? Will you be making substantial additional investments in the TTC and Metrolinx, et cetera? And how are you going to manage through the financial challenges of COVID-19?
Well, there's no question that the pandemic has created significant challenges for all of Ontario's municipal transit agencies and for Metrolinx as well. The massive drops in ridership that occurred when wave 1 was upon us. We asked everyone to stay home and everybody did. And so ridership dropped down to single digits. But transit systems never stopped working. You know, they kept taking frontline workers to work and home and just proved to everyone how essential transit is to our economy. As the economy began to gradually reopen, we saw that rise in ridership. But the costs of running a transit agency, and I know I'm speaking to the choir, have not really changed. In fact, they've probably gone up because of the costs of enhanced cleaning, the different engineering protocols that need to be in place to ensure the health and safety of drivers and passengers, and also the need to, in many cases, continue to run as many, if not more, buses and trains to ensure physical distancing. So the underlying financial model, economic model of a transit agency has shifted a lot this year. And early on in the pandemic, I started having regular conversations with transit systems to understand exactly what was occurring on the ground for them. And it was clear that transit systems were going to be dealing with significant budget shortfalls as a result of the loss in fare box revenue. And so we could not be in a situation where transit systems were not able to run. And so we worked very, very hard to provide funding for enhanced cleaning. We put in place guidance for how to run based on guidance from the Chief Medical Officer of Health on protocols that should be in place to safely run transit systems. And of course, our government worked very hard with our other provincial partners in Quebec and BC to ensure that part of the Safe Restart agreement that was negotiated with the federal government included operational dollars for transit systems. So we are committed to supporting transit agencies across the province as they're going through whatever COVID has been throwing our way. But I can say that we have regular phone calls and we're all collaborating to make sure that that both levels, all three levels of government, are aware of the challenges and doing what can be done to support transit systems.
Do you think people will come back to using transit after the COVID pandemic has receded or is over? In China, my understanding is that car buyership is up dramatically. Transit usership is still down as people are fearful of getting back onto transit.
I think people absolutely will, and you're right to point out what's going on in other jurisdictions where transit ridership has gone up. You know, the ridership for Metrolinx is still quite low. People, the mayor of Toronto has asked people to stay home, and the GTA and Peel region are in lockdown. So people aren't commuting into town. But ridership on the TTC and other municipal transit systems has picked up. And so I think that shows that people are showing increasing levels of confidence in transit. But I think that in the absence of a vaccine, we still will be experiencing low ridership numbers. But that said, we have been working very hard, at Metrolinx, and then sharing what Metrolinx's best practices are with other transit systems to show passengers that we have taken all the steps that are required to ensure that transit is safe. All of our buses now and our trains, we've got the plexiglass in place. Seats have been removed. The drivers have plexiglass to protect them. There are sanitizer dispensers on buses and as you're boarding onto the trains. And so we've taken a number of actions, more than 40 at Metrolinx, to ensure that taking transit is safe. And we've had a number of marketing campaigns to try to communicate that to people. But as I said, I think in the absence of a vaccine, Ontarians are generally going to either refrain from using it or choose to use their car if need be.
Given that ridership is down dramatically and will continue until we have either a vaccine or herd immunity or whatever, such that the pandemic is over, is your government still committed to transit, or do you think you're going to sort of shift your investment over to roads and highways?
We are absolutely still committed to transit. And even as I was having those conversations with transit systems about the deficits that they were projecting for the year as a result of lower ridership and fare box revenue, Metrolinx and Infrastructure Ontario and our government were still proceeding with our plans for our 4 priority transit projects. We issued the RFQs for 2 parts of the Ontario line. We moved forward with RFPs for tunneling for the Scarborough subway extension and the Eglinton Crosstown, the Eglinton West extension. And so we have not stopped moving forward on our plan. And as I said in my opening remarks, we have a very ambitious infrastructure plan, 143 billion, and half of it is in public transit. So it's not just our 4 priority transit projects, it's also GO Rail expansion. We know that, as the population in Ontario and especially in the GTA increases, we need to have the transit infrastructure that's necessary to get people around. But we're also compensating for a significant transit infrastructure deficit that exists. And so it's essential that we don't take our foot off the gas. There are a lot of puns in transportation, I learned when I became Minister of Transportation. So we're not taking our foot off the gas. In fact, we're leaning in and ensuring that we're implementing our plans that we had before the pandemic, because they're now more important than they were before.
Tell us, if you could, a little bit about the Ontario line. It sort of came by surprise. Not everyone was expecting that. Certainly, Metrolinx has always talked about other lines prior to that. Are you committed to it? What's the difference in technology? Just tell us a little about that infrastructure investment, if you could.
Well, people often refer to it as the crown jewel of our 4 priority transit projects. To me, it's an essential component of it, but all 4 lines are equally important, because they're going to provide much needed connections to the residents around those lines and also create jobs across the GTA. So to me, they're all important, but the Ontario line is unique because it will be a completely new line. It's not an extension of an existing line, and because it's new, it will give us it'll give us opportunities that we wouldn't have on the others that are extensions of the existing network. So we really will be able, as you mentioned, be able to automate this line. And so we're planning state-of-the-art, world-class transit rail cars, subway cars on the Ontario line. It's going to go from Ontario Place, Exhibition Station, all the way up to the Science Centre. It's 15.5 kilometers long, and it's going to provide connections across the city and through areas that had not been planned before. And that is really important. We want to connect more people to more opportunities, employment opportunities, educational opportunities. And so this 15.5 kilometer long line will do just that. And we issued, as I said, we've moved forward on the procurement. We issued 2 P3 RFQs, requests for qualifications, this summer to identify those who will design and build and maintain the line. And the entire thing will be built under 3 separate P3 contracts that we believe is essential to ensure the project's success. So in addition to moving forward with the procurement, we passed the Building Transit Faster Act this summer in July. And that piece of legislation is very important, because in addition to bringing forward the plan, we also have to make sure that we can implement it. And it's been difficult to get transit built in Ontario because of the red tape that has been in the way. And so the Building Transit Faster Act introduced a series of measures that allow us to move along much more quickly with our transit plans. It'll help us get shovels in the ground a lot faster. And the news of the Building Transit Faster Act was well received by the infrastructure world. But when City Council in Toronto voted on our agreement around the 4 subway lines, they also voted overwhelmingly in favor of measures to accelerate the delivery of transit, because they know that we couldn't do things the way we've been doing them in the past. We had to find ways to expedite and accelerate the delivery of transit because it's so needed. And so we've actually now, the legislature has now just considered, I had 3rd reading of Bill 222, the Ontario Rebuilding and Recovery Act, which extends some of those measures to other transit projects across Ontario, because they're needed in other areas of the province as well. So we're looking at this from all different angles and taking necessary steps to make sure that we get transit built.
Excellent. Just reminding everyone, this is the Transit Alliance meeting with Minister Carolyn Mulroney, the Minister of Transportation. If you could all mute your lines, I would appreciate it, other than obviously Minister Mulroney, and that will keep the conversation going as well as possible. Minister Mulroney, what about the airport and transit to the airport? Extension of Eglinton, electrification of the Union Pearson Express, this idea that the airport's talked about Union Station West. Tell us a little bit about what we can be expected in regards to transit to the airport, please.
Well, the area around the airport is one of the most important employment zones in the country. There are thousands of people who work there, in addition to all the people that travel through. And it's important to build the kind of city that Toronto needs to be, that we have a connection by subway. So we have the Up Express that's been doing well, but we have also been looking at taking the Eglinton West extension and trying to get that connection to the airport. So we are working with the GTAA on that file. My associate minister, Minister Surma, Kinga Surma, is especially passionate about this project because she's also the MPP for Etobicoke Centre. So she really is focused on bringing that kind of relief to her community. So the Eglinton West extension really is a critical piece in our transit expansion plan. We're going to be we're working closely with the GTAA to identify the best ways to do that.
I apologize. Just a reminder to everyone, could you please mute your telephone or your computer? A couple of you are coming through, and I can't find you fast enough to mute you. What about highways? With particularly increased car usage, lower ridership of transit, do we need to start building some more 400 series highways and reinvesting in highway infrastructure?
Well, as the population grows and economic activity increases, we're certainly going to need to invest in our highway network. That's a fact. The 401 through Toronto is the busiest highway in North America, and I'm sure that if most of the participants today live in the GTA, they're not surprised by that fact. So we absolutely need to invest in our existing network and look at additional expansion opportunities for highways across the province. We invest $2.6 billion. We will be investing $2.6 billion in our highways next year. But this is actually also part of what we need to do to help Ontario recover from the pandemic. Part of the bill that I referenced earlier, Bill 222, extends some of those measures that we had in the Building Transit Faster Act to highway projects, so that we can expedite the delivery of our highway expansion and our repair work. They generate a lot of jobs, and they boost real GDP. For every $100 million that we invest in public infrastructure, real GDP is boosted by 114 million. And, Brian, if you look through history, governments have responded with infrastructure projects when faced with an economic shock or crisis. After the Depression, Roosevelt brought in the New Deal. More recently in Canada in 2008, 2009, the federal government brought in Canada's Action Plan, and it had a lot of dollars for infrastructure. So we believe that investing in infrastructure is key to creating jobs and ensuring that we are creating the conditions for economic growth, long-term and sustainable economic growth. So we are absolutely committed to expanding our highway network and doing that in a way that meets the needs of people around and the local communities around those highways, but also our long-term vision for Ontario's economic recovery.
A lot of people have gotten used to working from home. A lot of us are connected in today from their home offices rather than from their downtown offices. I was downtown I guess 2 weeks ago for the first time in a couple of months, and it was almost not a ghost town, but it was pretty vacant. Do you think our downtowns are going to come back, whether they be downtown Toronto or main streets, downtowns of all the cities, towns, and villages around Ontario? Or are we going to enter a new paradigm where people are working from home, not needing their cars, not needing their transit, not needing their highways?
Well, I do think the downtown core will come back, and that cities and towns across the province and the country will come back. I am optimistic. I believe that once we have the vaccine, people will feel that they're comfortable enough to return back to some of their old ways. That said, we have all experienced, working from home, and some of the benefits of technology that have allowed us seamlessly to transition our businesses to this new platform. So I think there will be some changes that we will see in the future. But that said, I do believe that people will return to coming back to downtown and to working in person. And that means, from my perspective as Minister of Transportation and as a member of this government that's focused on infrastructure, is making sure that we have the infrastructure in place to handle that return to work and then that future growth. So that's why, as I said, we're still committed to building public transit and making sure that it's convenient and affordable. All the issues that we were talking about beforehand, we're still talking about here at MTO. We're just waiting for the right time to implement some of the new programs. We also have introduced, and it was part of Building Transit Faster, our transit-oriented communities program. So we believe that along the Ontario line and along our extensions of our existing lines, that we should build complete communities, that people are going, although we know some people are looking to live outside the city, we believe people will want to live here and around subway stations. It's more convenient. And so we're focused on putting the program in place so that we can work with municipalities to ensure that we can create those kinds of communities. It's the right kind of city planning, and it's the right kind of transit planning. So I am optimistic. Canadians have been very cautious throughout this pandemic, which I think has been part of our success in dealing with it relative to some other countries. And so when governments ask people to stay home, they do. But as I said, I believe that when the vaccine is here, that we'll see people return to work.
When you were speaking about the Ontario line, you mentioned P3 investments and partnerships. Does your government intend to continue using the P3 model?
Yes, we are always looking at ways to get the best value for taxpayers' dollars. And so, you know, on the P3 model, if a project runs over business, then the private sector pays, and if it falls behind schedule, then the private sector pays. So that's why we look at the P3 model. We believe that it provides value for taxpayers, but it also allows us to, you know, leverage the expertise and the competitiveness of the private sector so that we can expand our network. So we've used them successfully in Ontario, and we are using that model as well as we look to our 4 priority transit projects.
Excellent. What is your vision for transit and transportation around the GTA?
Oh, well, I think our government has put forward a very ambitious one. Just before the pandemic, Minister Surma and I spoke at a conference of city planners here in Toronto, and we talked about our 4 priority lines, and we talked about transit-oriented communities and about GO Rail expansion, and it was very well received. I think, you know, in terms of the vision that I have, it's to just sort of bring the GTA up to where it needs to be and then think beyond that. And that's where transit-oriented communities comes into play. So building the lines, building those connections, but then also creating communities around transit, I think is essential. It will, it sort of is a way to reimagine the GTA and improve upon the quality of life that people have now, and that just make sure that as we welcome more and more people over the coming years, that we have the infrastructure in place so that people can enjoy that high quality of life that I think is important in a world-class city like Toronto is. So I think for our vision, what I'd like to do is just keep implementing our plan and doing that in a way that's collaborative with the City of Toronto, this region of York, and other municipalities around, so that we are building a transit system and a transit-oriented communities program that reflects the needs of people who live there.
I wonder if you could, for a second, think really longer term and tell us what you and your government's plans or strategy is in regards to high-speed rail, Hyperloop, electric vehicles, autonomous vehicles.
So these are some of the most exciting files that we get to work on here at MTO. It brings in a lot of different kinds of stakeholders because it's so because it's in the future, and you know, we need to bring in people who are thinking far down the road in terms of what technology can bring and how we can adapt our infrastructure today so that we can meet those kinds of technological challenges or technological opportunities and innovations down the road. So we are really focused on new technology, especially where it expands mobility options for Ontarians. but it does need to be the right option in the right place. And high-speed rail that you mentioned is a perfect example. So under the previous government, they had a plan for high-speed rail, but it would have turned industrial and agricultural lands and commercial hubs like Windsor and London into sort of bedroom communities of Toronto. And that really is not what people are looking for. I unveiled the transportation plan for Southwestern Ontario, and it will bring together a group of local voices around the table to talk about what the local transportation needs are. And I can tell you that high-speed rail isn't something that they were looking for. So we certainly want to provide more connections and faster connections so people spend less time commuting, but it has to be the right kind of option. And so connected and automated vehicles are it's something that is always, they're innovating so quickly on that file. But we have to make sure that that we're integrating safety, and that's our role at MTO, to make sure that it's safe for pedestrians and it's safe for other vehicles on the road. And so we're working closely with innovative groups that are bringing forward these technologies to make sure that all of them are right for Ontarians.
We got a question from the audience in regards to the role of affordable housing in your transit-oriented development. Can you address affordable housing?
Absolutely. As I indicated, we are working closely with our municipal partners and our partners at the region in York on making sure that our transit-oriented communities program addresses local needs as well as provincial priorities. So we are putting together a list of shared priorities between the municipalities and the province to ensure that they're built into the program. And we're going to be looking at each transit-oriented station, each transit-oriented community on a site-by-site basis, so that certain areas affordable housing will be key, and other childcare will be something that residents and the municipality will be looking at. We want to be flexible and responsive, and at the same time, as I said, build that complete community and do it at good value for the taxpayer.
If there was one big game-changing transit development that we haven't talked about, that your government hasn't put into planning yet, that you dream of, what would it be?
Oh, well, I think it sort of goes back to your earlier question about emerging technologies and trends. I want to make sure, for me, I think the CVAV world is incredibly exciting and innovative, and I think that that's going to change the way we get around, and I think it's going to increase mobility options for Ontarians. Doing that right, given our climate, is important. And so for me, that's one of the files that I look to as something that's incredibly exciting and could dramatically change the landscape.
Well, Minister, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. On the line, you've now got 63 different members of the transit industry in Ontario, people that are interested in transit. As we sort of enter into the hopefully the last stage of this pandemic, do you have any message for us?
Well, just thank you to all of you for all that you're doing to keep our transit systems working and helping them overcome these difficult challenges that the pandemic has brought upon us, and also for providing ideas for the future. So thank you. And Brian, thank you for hosting me today. It was a real pleasure.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate it. So that was Minister Caroline Mulroney, the Minister of Transportation, the Minister of Francophone Affairs, joining us. Just to remind everyone, this is Transit Alliance. Most of you, I recognize your names, you're members of Transit Alliance. Transit Alliance is a civic advocacy organization. We've been operational here in the GTA for about 8 years. I'm the chair of the board. We've gone virtual during the pandemic, as a lot of you have. We used to have fairly regular monthly dinner meetings where we would invite people like Minister Mulroney, the mayors, other members of political organizations and administrative organizations involved in transit to our dinners and network and hear what they have to say. We've had to obviously stop those, and we've had a couple of virtual, I think some really interesting virtual meetings over the time. We do, however, still have to continue our organization. We've got a couple of administrative people and some research and some expenses. And so to the extent that you are not a member, this is my little advertising segment to appeal to you to join as a member, and you can do that online at transitalliance.com. To follow up to the Minister of Transportation, I met earlier the Vice President of Corporate Environmental Affairs for General Motors of Canada, a gentleman by the name of David Patterson. Interesting gentleman. He's worked for the last 6 years for General Motors. Prior to that, he worked for BlackBerry and Manulife in senior communications roles. And prior to that, he was with General Motors as well. And prior to that, he was with AMEC in London, England. He's got a MA from McGill and a BA from Queen's. So he's a incredibly experienced gentleman. And GM has just recently announced a $1 billion investment in Oshawa to reopen the truck plant. And so their commitment to vehicles in Canada and to trucks is interesting, and he's going to tell us a little about that. But then also, what I think is quite interesting is some of GM's developments in regards to both electrical cars and autonomous vehicles, and he's going to tell us a little bit about that. So David Patterson, hello, welcome to our show.
Hi, Brian, and I hope you can hear me all right. I think appropriately I'm joining the Zoom call from my car. Today my Wi-Fi crashed. I won't mention the name of the provider, but it starts with R. And as a result, I wasn't able to do this from home. So I'm using my OnStart connection from my GM car in the parking lot today. And fortunately, its Wi-Fi is stronger than the house. No, I really appreciated listening to the minister's remarks. And yes, we've had some really good news with a big investment to reopen our plant in Oshawa, and that's going to create about 12,000 jobs between ourselves and the supply chain, which couldn't come at a better time, frankly, with COVID and the like. But it comes in the context of really a much more future-oriented vision from General Motors that is led by our CEO, Mary Barra. And it really comes down, and I think very appropriate for the discussion today, to a vision of a world with zero emissions through electric vehicles, zero crashes on our roads, and we lose 40,000 people a year in North America to car crashes that could be avoided. And I'll talk a little bit more today about probably our most audacious vision, which is a world of zero congestion. Zero congestion, traffic congestion on our roads seems like a pretty audacious goal, especially for someone who lives in the GTA. So very quickly, electric vehicles. We're at the biggest transition point in the auto sector since we moved away from horses. And General Motors will be introducing 30 new electric vehicles over the next 5 years into the marketplace. And it's going to really require an awful lot of interaction with our governments. Our charging networks at home and at work are going to be really critical. We've seen some news in that, but frankly, not nearly enough. And we're going to need to help people get into electric vehicles. We're doing everything we can to bring down the cost of batteries, which is the biggest issue. We're investing $3 billion in a battery plant to manufacture them here in North America. And it's really exciting. The second one, the minister referred to in terms of very connected and autonomous vehicles. We've had for the last 2 years 200 autonomous vehicles on the streets of San Francisco, navigating that city extremely effectively. The technology is very, very effective. And if you had the opportunity to come to our sort of proving grounds, we had our head of GM Canada down there last year, and he was invited to drive one of our autonomous vehicles or sit in it with someone else in another vehicle. And the challenge was try and make these two cars hit each other. And they tried for half an hour, but it was impossible. So the technology can help to prevent a lot of injury and a lot of really unacceptable death on our roads if we adopt it. And we're seeing a lot of the transitionary technologies in that regard with lane keeping and automatic crash assistance. But when we have that kind of a track record in terms of the impact of people driving, we really have to take this on. And so we're taking it on with a vengeance, and I'll come back to that. But the third one, really, again, I think the most audacious is clearly
We've lost you. Hello, we lost you. Hello, hello, hello.
Muted by accident.
Sorry, I don't know how that happened. Just congestion on the roads. We're undertaking an awful lot of future-oriented experiment in terms of the sharing of vehicles and platforms to do that, which we think can be part of the transition to really make public transportation more effective and to be a partner to public transportation. So I don't see public transportation as a competitor at all for our business. I see it as a partner, and sharing services can make a difference. And so quickly, the kinds of things that we're doing at General Motors, we've experimented with a service we called Maven, where people can share cars. So, you know, if you own a car today, it probably sits in the driveway 95% of the time. It's not a very efficient use of a big capital asset, but you sometimes need a car, and you can share a car very quickly. Of course, you can rent one, but car sharing services off your phone. E-bikes, we've developed a series of e-bikes that can be extremely complementary to public transportation. And again, closing that last mile to public transportation, really important. We've worked on e-delivery services, which are going to be really important in terms of efficiency of use of the road, platooning technologies to help more efficient use of the road, from big semi-trailers down to other solutions. And we also were the first company in Canada to utilize a lot of the what we call V2V or V2X technology, which is using a spectral band in Canada to ensure that cars can talk to each other and talk to the infrastructure so that we can better manage traffic in those types of ways. So all those things we're experimenting with, believe it or not, even with flying vehicles, and a lot of
flying vehicles.
Absolutely. And a variety of technologies that are just going to blow your mind. But really, at the end of the day, this comes down to 3 or 4 things. One is we can make more efficient use of our infrastructure if we share, instead of publicly own a gazillion vehicles. We get that. The second implication of that is that you need to change the relationship that you have in the car industry with your customer. And so your relationship, like the relationship that allowed me to join in on this call today, maybe through an app on your phone, maybe through a service like OnStar, as opposed to just owning a car. So we're becoming a technology company, more like a telecommunications company than just a car company. Third thing is that you need to think about complementing public transit, not competing with it. And so the last mile, you can get a really good transfer from Pearson Airport to downtown. But if you're meeting John Beck uptown, you're going to need to jump in some kind of vehicle and have that arranged for you. And maybe it's going to be an e-bike. If it was John, he'd go on an e-bike. But if it was me, I'd probably jump in a robo-taxi. And those things are going to become much more common. In fact, the estimate for the robo-taxi industry in the world is a multi-trillion-dollar business. And we're developing people movers and individual autonomous vehicles that can do that. And then finally, not only can we be more efficient in our use of space, but there is a huge opportunity for Ontario in terms of economic development and job creation, in that we have here an incredible base of expertise and really smart people in our universities. And so, again, I spent a lot of my time doing things such as a big project that will soon be announced with the University of Toronto, which I think has global implications, between GM and the University of Toronto, to learn more about how autonomous vehicles can operate in snow. And, how do you deal with snow covering the lines on the roads and whatever? So we're very successful in the southern United States with this technology, but we have an abundance of crappy weather up here, and that actually can be an economic development opportunity if we actually get behind that, develop IP here in Canada, and then develop businesses that can grow in that area and bring that technology to market here with very specialized things such as our weather. So I'll leave it at that, Brian, and I hope that I just want to underline one thing, and that is that while the auto industry is still producing internal combustion engines, and that will benefit our economy quite a bit in Ontario for a while, it's part of a bigger transition. And the transition is going to be to electric. It's going to be to highly connected vehicles that don't bump into each other. And it's going to be into services that complement public transportation and make it better.
Excellent. Thank you. Let's go back just for a second to your $1 billion investment. A little bit surprising that in this era of lower emissions and congestion and move to transit and everything else, you're putting $1 billion into trucks. Tell us about that, if you could.
Yeah, the investment we're making in Oshawa is in pickup trucks. That's still about 40% of what people buy today. It's the biggest segment that we have. I'm sitting in a parking lot north of Collingwood, and most of the vehicles here are pickup trucks. So the usage are different in different parts of the province or the country. And frankly, pickup trucks, which are big market users right now, will go electric. And that's something we've already announced. And from the very fun, of course, from my friends in the environmental movement, probably no GM vehicle could be more nefarious than the Hummer. The Hummer is coming back as an all-electric vehicle with 1,000 horsepower and is going to be an awful lot of fun, but it's a precursor to our ability to deliver electric pickup trucks that will have a range of over 600 kilometers on their battery and be able to really tow and do work in ways that even the vehicles that we produce today don't. And so we're in that transition. And frankly, the pickups we're making in Oshawa help us pay for it.
You've described a world that is pretty radical with electric cars that are connected, that can platoon, that can talk to each other, that can, solve the last mile from a transit standpoint. But, if they're shared and they're platooning, they could be the better way to go on the Gardiner Expressway or the Don Valley Parkway to your office downtown. You don't have to park it. It could, frankly, change our urban landscape if you can, double or triple the amount of capacity on those major highways because they're platooning and there's less space in between them. Are our governments designing our cities for a environment of the past rather than what you're going to create in the future?
I think that we have a lot of work to do. There's no question, and there's huge opportunity. I think, in fairness, that we spend a fair amount of time working with municipal officials, and it's hard enough just delivering a good public transportation system that's affordable to people. It's really hard. And I think that is an excellent use of focus and time, but they need to have a part of the brain that is focused on where we're going in the future and where these interactions can take place, where we've got smart cities, smart infrastructure, and better use of technology to reduce congestion. There are different strategies in the city. Right now, my top priority in the city would just be to have a building code that allows people to get a charger. Because we're denying electric vehicles to people because they can't charge them. Or, I have my neighbor here has a 200-foot extension to charge his electric vehicle, and he's not allowed to do it in the winter because it has to sit on the side of the road and it's getting plowed. And so we have some of those things that we've got to work through from a practical point of view to make this a realistic future. But I see my friend John Beck on the phone, and we work together on the Highway 407. I mean, imagine a world where we had a lane and maybe a big business opportunity for the RT that was dedicated to platooning trucks that could make their way around the GTA to deliver the parts that are needed to build the the vehicles or the major uses in the east or the west of the GTA. And wouldn't it be nice if we didn't have to compete with the semis when we're on the 401? Those are all things we could do. I mean, you could do that relatively quickly, and the technology is here. What we need to do is be bold and go and test that technology and show that we can do it here better than anywhere in the world. John and I had experience with some new technology that got tested out in Israel. And Israel is fantastic at going out and developing technology and putting it forward and investing in it, and then owning it, taking the IP and using it as a growth opportunity around the world. Why the heck aren't we doing that?
I agree with you. And so that's why I'm trying to push you on this. We've got, here as part of our Transit Alliance meeting, numerous different people that are in the infrastructure development and development business, builders, et cetera. I was involved somewhat in the potential construction of a hockey arena. And I had someone like you, a autonomous vehicle oriented person, come and say, you've got it all wrong. This is an investment you're making for 35 to 50 years, and you're designing it for 10,000 parking spots. You should, rather than that, be designing it for the mother of all kiss and ride drop-offs. And you've got to rethink things like airports and factories and office buildings and arenas and whatnot for the world that's going to exist in 5 or 10 years, where people are going to be arriving in electrical, autonomous, shared vehicles, and how you're going to get them out of their cars and into their facilities rather than the way they're doing it today. What do you think of that?
No, I think that's true, but I think sometimes perfection becomes the enemy of getting started on certain things. And I think there are numerous projects that we could be doing and initiating in Toronto. I think in a way, it's a shame that we lost some of the opportunities down on the Portlands to go and do a lot of things that were noble experiments, but we still have some massive opportunities down that area that we should be using in terms of autonomous shuttles and complementary services to public transportation. I mean, I have a millennial daughter. She's in her early 20s. I ask her, what do you want out of your transportation system? She says, well, Dad, I don't need a car. And so I'm an executive at General Motors. That comes hard. But I said, okay, well, you don't want a car. What do you want? She said, I just want an app on my phone that will tell me how to get there quickly. And boy, do I sympathize with that. I think, we have some of the best software developers in the world in downtown Toronto. We have 1,000 people now working in Markham, Ontario, working on software systems for autonomous vehicles, for electric vehicle systems, battery management systems, and sensors for vehicles that may be transitionary vehicles like the one I'm in now that's still internal combustion, but it's got lane keeping and automatic crash capability. Just that capability of keeping people in the lane. Think of how many lives we save because of idiots that are texting on their phones that at least the car keeps them in the line. And, let alone they should be banned from using their phone. But, so all these things, and they're happening right here. That's the cool thing. And it's not just General Motors. Some of the other companies are starting to look at Canada as a development R&D rich area. Ford is doing some good software work up in Ottawa. FCA has always done some down in the Windsor area. Working with universities like Waterloo, University of Toronto, McMaster, they're off the charts good in terms of the things that we can do. We put millions of dollars into those universities in terms of co-developing capabilities. And frankly, that launches small Canadian companies that develop their own IP, own their own IP, and then can scale. The unfortunate thing in the auto industry is that there's only about 20 companies that can help you scale. And so you've got to have those here. We got 5 of them manufacturing here. And so why aren't we doing more engineering here, more software here, more experimentation here? I think there's lots of opportunity.
How soon is this world of autonomous, electrical, shared vehicles coming?
Electric vehicles fast, but we always forget that the road population is almost 100% internal combustion right now. So the turnover of the road takes about 20 years in terms of cycling through new technology. Now, every year we put we turn over about 7% of the fleet in Canada. And right now, of the 7%, only 3% are electric. So do the math. Under 1% is actually getting cycled. That's the speed of the transition that we're doing. Everyone focuses on, well, let's get as many higher percentage of the new vehicles as we can. And we like that. And we're investing big time to be able to do it. But we have to appreciate that there's going to be a transition. So electric is going to be like when we moved from horses. Peak horse in North America, when we stopped adding more horses to the road, wasn't until 2020. So we're going to see a period of transition, and we should really be using that time to get very smart on smart cities, I think. And then this technology will take off in terms of its lifestyle improvement, as long as we can bring autonomous systems, smart vehicle connectivity systems, and make them electric. All our autonomous vehicles will be electric. As I say, we'll have 30 new nameplates of electric vehicles out in the next 5 years. So it's happening pretty quick.
When I turned 16, the very first thing I wanted to do was get my driver's license. The second thing I wanted to do is get a car. Are you suggesting the world's going to change, and like your daughter, all we're going to want is an app, and we're going to have shared vehicles, and none of us are going to have private ownership?
I think in the cities, it's going to change. I think I'm in rural Ontario right now, and I think it's going to be harder to see some of these types of changes happen as quickly in rural Ontario. This is pickup truck country. It can go electric, but like I mentioned, my neighbor, the municipalities up here haven't even started, from my perspective, to think about electric charging and things like that. We got a long way to go. So we can put all our attention into the city of Toronto and maybe Ottawa and Waterloo or something, but we got to think right across Canada, I think.
Okay, so I wanted to introduce you to everyone here because I thought that these ideas that you're talking about the future, are things that people in the transit industry have got to be fully aware of. But given that it's going to take 20 plus years for this turnover to occur, and so therefore you're not talking about right away, what do you think people in the transportation development industry need to be mindful of in the short to medium term?
Well, I think we need to make public transportation better, more accessible, and more interconnected. And I think that's the kind of effort that is underway and taking place. I like a lot of the good attention that we're starting to see out of the Ontario government and the federal government. I think that, of course, being in the auto industry, I'd welcome some patience, but I'd also welcome some attention to the role that the private sector can play to make a lot of these things happen. Because I think it tends to be assumed that this is a public sector mission, and it should be. But if you want to go fast, and if you want to look at models around the world where it goes fast, you better link into the private sector.
So how does Ontario or Canada be at the forefront of this, if this is the car industry of 20 years from now?
Well, again, I think you've got to set priorities and not try and boil the ocean. I think there are in the areas I covered today of electric, autonomous, and congestion types of things. I think there are specific types of priorities that can allow us to go fast in each of those areas. So on electric, we've got to do better on charging, and especially easy home charging. Our job is to get the battery costs down, and we're working on that. We'll get that done. Within 5 years, we should have electric vehicles that can sell at cost parity to internal combustion engines, and the company selling them could make a profit. But even my company and another company that starts with T, they don't make any money on electric cars. They make money on selling credits that are sold to other companies that don't sell electric cars. We have work to do to make electric work. Autonomous is in a regulatory space where we need to unleash the ability of the private sector to move things forward. And that's starting to be discussed more in the United States. Canada is a fast follower, and I think that's actually appropriate because we have an integrated auto industry, and you want to be able to drive your car across the bridge in Windsor, and whether it's an autonomous vehicle or whatever, it should be able to cross between our countries. I think the most interesting area is the interesting you're all in, and that is, how do we prepare the future for better public transportation, and how do we make the interplay between the private sector solutions that can complement public transportation and, I would say, solve the last mile problem? How do we make that work? And it starts with people talking to people.
Your autonomous vehicles, electrical vehicles, last mile solution conversations has been interesting. Is there a place that you see doing that, solving that problem best?
I think Toronto is an awesome place to do that. We've had some, I think, we have bought a big property for technology development down in the Portlands. So we opened a big software area, as I said, in Markham. Our next big center that we're opening on the technology area is down on sort of Lakeshore and Leslie area. And that's a experimentation playground right down there. That's an area where we can do some smart and intelligent things. So we should get our act together and sort of get behind a couple of intriguing things. When people come back, as they will with vaccines, there's a big working population down there in the technology sector. And we've got to get over this kind of, we're not as good as Silicon Valley. We're every bit as good as Silicon Valley here. We just maybe could use a few more investors, but the type of smart people that we have are every bit as good here in Canada.
Well, thank you so much for sharing with us, both what you're doing in Oshawa, but when I spoke with you earlier in the week about this vision of the future of electrical, connected, shared, and autonomous vehicles, I really thought that it was a future vision that everyone on Transit Alliance needed to be mindful of and aware of, even if it's not going to happen right away, because it certainly changes the environment of the future. I was at a seminar just a little while ago where the keynote speaker said that the biggest change in our urban landscape was because of cars replacing horses, and that actually cars were the green solution because they solved a huge manure problem that the horses were creating within our streets. But it changed our urban landscape because carriage houses were replaced by garages, and all of the streets and parking and everything else was changed in our whole urban landscape. What you've described and what this individual keynote speaker said is potentially as big a change to our urban landscape and the way we get around as going from horses to cars. Yeah,
absolutely. I think that's absolutely right. And the opportunity is all in our hands too. I just want to make sure we don't let it slip away from Canada. Well, thank you very much for joining us, and thank you everyone else for joining us for our Transit Alliance meeting today. We've got a couple of really interesting invites out and potential acceptances for the new year with Kinga Surma, the Associate Minister of Transportation, and some people from infrastructure, both in Queen's Park as well as in Ottawa. So I encourage you to stay connected with Transit Alliance. Our website is transitalliance.com. Please check us out. If you aren't already a member, please join as a member. And I'll give myself a plug if I could. I did interview numerous different people, have interviewed numerous different people from transit and development industry on my radio show that is on every night on Saga 960 AM. And all the past video casts and podcasts are available on briancrombie.com, my website. So I do more than just transit, but I do a lot of things, but all my transit interviews are there as well. Anyway, thank you all very much for joining us. And if we don't have another meeting before the holiday season, all the best for the holidays to everyone. Thank you so much. Thanks, Brian. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, John Beck. Thank you, Saba. I see you. Ayaz, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for an interesting session.
Thank you very much. Good night, everybody. Goodbye, everybody. I mean.
Bye.
Vicky Turnbull, thank you for joining us.